Tonight I'm pleased to present a special edition of our program, a conversation with Françoise Gilot, made possible by a grant from Paine Webber.
Tonight's program is brought to you by the investment firm of Paine Webber.
Mon histoire, c'est l'histoire d'un amour. Ma complainte, c'est la plainte de deux cœurs.
Growing up in Paris,
Yeah.
tell me about your father and your mother and what influence they may, as you look back, have had on you becoming the painter that you became.
First of all, my mother was a good watercolorist,
Yes.
and she did ceramics also, but you know, at that time you didn't do it professionally, but she was extremely good, and she had studied art history, etc. When I was 5 years old, I said, not knowing exactly what it entailed, I want to become a painter, like some other children say, I want to be a fireman. So I wanted to be a painter. And my father was an agronomist and a businessman, but he was mostly literary. He liked literature, philosophy, etc. My mother was really in the arts. In my family, everybody could draw fairly well.
Yes.
So it was something that everybody could do, but was not considered something that you will do as a profession.
What did your father want you to do? Just to...
Well, I went to law school because my father wanted me to go to law school. And I could paint all I wanted, but I had to follow a normal course of study, which I don't regret. Like everybody else, I played the piano, but I knew I was not gifted. I love music, but I was not gifted. You know, it's either, in art, you are born with it or you are not. You can learn if you are born with it. If you are not born with it, it's better to think about something else.
If you're not born with it, you'll never be great.
Yeah.
No.
But it took me exactly until I was about 21 to make sure inside myself that I would not regret having made that decision.
You wanted to assure yourself that you had the talent, or that you were good?
Yeah, because my father was a very intelligent man, so we had discussions together. So he said, you know, if you want to be an attorney or medical doctor, a physician, something, if you are a good one, that's fine. If you want to be a painter, you have to be a great painter or nothing. So I thought he was quite right. So when I was 16, it was a bit difficult to be certain and be able to tell my father was a bit, awesome that, yes, I know I can do that. No, I couldn't say that. At that time, I was working a lot, but I waited until I was 21, then I left everything.
Yeah, but to read about you, in your own words, is to find and discover this young woman who had her own head, who knew who she was, who was confident in herself, who was smart and savvy beyond her years.
Well, I think I owe that mostly also to my father, because my father was, in a sense, he was quite strict, but at the same time, we could discuss things together and have some, like, contracts together. You know, if you do this to please me, then you can do that which pleases you. So we would trade. So I would do, as I said, I would study the law, but as he said jokingly, well, you know, if you work 8 hours at law school, you can work 8 hours with your paintings, and then you can go horseback riding for an hour, and then you sleep 4 hours, and that's enough, you know. And it was a little bit the way I lived. So my father, in a sense, was not limiting me. He was just helping me to be very aware or lucid about myself.
Yeah, but was he a more profound influence than your mother, even though she was the artist in the family?
Well, I think that, you see, my mother was the artist in the family. My father was my mentor intellectually, you might say.
A broader sense of intellect.
Well, it's not broader. Being artistic is more intuitive. And my father...
Intuitive.
Yes.
Yeah.
My father was much more rational.
And which are you?
I am a bit crazy. But I can be very logical. You see, logical delirium is what artists should have.
When did you finally say, I'm a painter, this is what I am?
I said that finally in 1941.
1941 was war years.
Yes.
1941 was German occupation of
Yes,
Paris.
well, you see, that really had an effect on me because, I knew that in a way I could also not have been alive, So after that I thought, well, I don't know how long we all remain alive, so I'm going to do what I want.
I've interviewed so many people who've said, it was only facing death that they began to realize the most important lesson in life, which is, A, you ought to be what you want to be, and secondly, you ought to live every moment of life as if there's no tomorrow.
Yes, that's what happened to people of my generation, really. So people always ask, how come you were so mature? Well, we became, in my generation, we became mature from one day to the next, because that's what we thought, our life was not worth a penny, except that it was quite expensive to buy it back. But every day, anything could happen. And we wanted, after that, that's why I really wanted to paint, to leave a kind of témoignage, something behind me, even if I didn't last myself. I wanted to say what I had, something that I had to say. Yes.
Yeah. The impact of the war on your work was what?
Well,
Before
you
43.
see, you know that I had my first exhibition in 43,
Right.
in May of 43, and when you had an exhibition in Paris at that time, there was always some German officers not in uniform would come to see if there was no content in the show that would be against them. So most of what we did was to do it symbolically.
Yes.
So, for example, in 43, I had a painting called, it looked like a still life, but it was called The Hawk, and there was a taxidermized hawk in the first plane, and knives and scissors, things that are hurting. And behind there was a landscape of Paris.
Was that the most exciting time of your life? Because it was
No,
war, because...
Well, it was a tragic time in life. It was not such an exciting time. It was a very tragic time. Many of my best friends were killed in the underground movement or deported if they were Jewish, etc. So I can tell you, we cannot consider it as an exciting time, but as a very tragic time. And I believe also that if I had met Picasso, in normal circumstances, nothing would have happened between himself and myself. It was in this doomsday type of situation.
You may not be alive tomorrow, so let's go.
Yeah. Otherwise, I think in normal, peacetime, our differences would have been such that it was.
Then Picasso.
Well, I met Pablo Picasso in May of 1943 because I had that exhibition.
Right.
That exhibition was not a one-person show, it was a two-person show. And a friend of mine who was from the south of France and who exhibited with me, she had been a student of Mayol.
What was her name?
Geneviève Aliquot.
Yes.
Then, one evening we went to dinner at a restaurant called the Catalan, and we were with the actor Alain Cuny, having dinner with him. And Picasso, who knew him, came towards us offering a bowl of cherries. That was something to say, and said he wanted to be introduced to us. So
That was his entree.
Yes. It's funny because that year, from 43 until 46, you see a number of bowls of cherries in Picasso's paintings, which kind of are related to that event. Yeah.
Because he was pleased about the moment and just repeated it using the cherries.
Well, the cherries became also a symbol, I think, you see, in painting, you express yourself through symbols. Then many times the bowl of cherries was there, and next to it were 3 glasses, which were probably Alain Cuny and Geneviève and myself. And then a coffee pot was supposed to be Picasso, etc. So anyway, many people are astonished when I say that, but it's absolutely true because the language of painting is cryptic by itself. So, you make, it's like a metaphor in literature, but in painting you have to make a metaphor that is a visual metaphor.
Yeah. And even in portraits, it's as much about the painter as it is about the subject.
Yes, but nevertheless, like for example in the show of Picasso Portraiture,
Yes.
I think Picasso is somebody who was not making, portrait literally at all, but who would find a way to symbolize a person. Like, let's say with me, it would be, for example, the color, a certain green, a certain blue, and certain shapes, you know, so it's like a leitmotif. So that person will come out mostly in those colors.
Did your paintings, regardless of Picasso, began to become less colorful because of the war? Because using less color, becoming more
well, there was, you know,
gray?
They were not so gray, they were more darker. And also because at that time I was really very interested in, not in Picasso, but in Georges Braque. Yes. Because...
As an influence.
Yes, I mean as a kind of mentor, you know. Yes. My mentors in modern art were mostly Matisse and Georges Braque. I wanted to have mentors who were French, because I thought I was myself entirely French, 100%, so I didn't see... I admired Picasso as a great painter, but I didn't think I was of his, we call in French, of his family of painters. Yes. He was more expressionistic, and I was more meditative, if you like. So my closeness was to people like Matisse and Georges Braque, especially at that time, and mostly Georges Braque. I think that's why Picasso, when he saw that, he thought,
Was he jealous of Braque then?
No, but you know, they had been, as you know, they had been friends and extremely close friends.
And influenced each other in the creation of Cubism.
Yeah, but you may not call that so much an influence as a collaboration almost, because they were painting every day. Each evening they would see what the other had been doing and they would discuss it, etc. So you might say, even though the public doesn't realize that painters have dialogues about painting, but they have to be with the paintings themselves, not in speech.
One of the best things I loved about the book you wrote about Picasso and Matisse is the great dialogue about the armchair.
Isn't that funny? Yeah.
Tell me the story.
He said, well, you know, with you, Matisse can do no wrong. Yes. You know, so everything he does is marvelous, everything. And when it's me, you always find something that could have been, you know. So I said, no, but, well, I think for me, Matisse, I think it's just as extraordinary and difficult in painting to express joy as it is to express drama. So I like him for that. And so he said, yes, but you see, he's a bourgeois, because that annoyed me a little bit. He's a bourgeois because, and then he quoted that sentence, unfortunate sentence that Matisse had said maybe around 1910, or I don't know when he said that when an industrialist comes back home after a long day of work, etc., he wants to sit in a pleasant armchair and look at a painting, and that painting has a kind of therapeutic effect on him, and a good painting should be like a good armchair. That, of course, was very unfortunate, so I could not say that was right. And he said, what's more, he painted an armchair which is really disgusting, absolutely disgusting. Looks like, you know, if you have your guts thrown on the canvas, there is no vertical, no horizontal, it's all outside, you know. I said, well, it's an open composition. I was fairly pedantic at the time. And I said, anyway, there are two verticals and two horizontals, because, you know, the frame of the painting being rectangular, then you have two verticals and two horizontals. Yeah. So he said, I can't discuss with you when it's Matisse, everything is right.
But then he carried the conversation on when the two of you went to see Matisse, and Matisse and Picasso got involved into a debate about the armchair.
Yes, but...
And then you jumped in.
Yeah, because...
they were getting
I knew that
tense.
I knew it would end badly, you know.
And sort of you were the one person who could sort of keep them separate because they were getting into...
Yeah, because I brought about two paintings that they had done at different times. One was not an armchair, but a chair by Matisse with some fruits or flowers on it. And then there was a chair by Picasso in 1943, which has much more abstract, but also flowers. So I said, well, anyway, you both painted, if not armchairs, chairs. Yeah. So that did it. Was finished for the day.
Let's go on to dinner. What did Matisse think of your relationship with Picasso?
Well, first of all, when we came to see Matisse together the first time, Picasso introduced me as a young painter. I want you to meet that young painter. And so Matisse right away said, "Oh, that's very nice that you are bringing her here because then I will make a portrait." At that time, Picasso had not made my portrait. So, of course, Picasso didn't like the idea at all. But it was a kind of game between them. So Matisse went on saying, yes, I had a lot of rather reddish hair at that time, mane of hair. And he said, and I will paint her hair dark green and her skin will be pale blue. And so Picasso said nothing, but he said, yes, we'll come back. But at that time, we didn't come back before he did himself in May the painting, which is quite well known, the woman flower, where the hair is green and the body is pale blue.
Directly from Matisse. Did you ever sit for Matisse in the painting that he wanted you to sit for?
No,
Never did?
No.
Picasso would not hear of that?
No, but
or you would not hear of that?
Would have been a very ill-conceived thing to do. I mean, even if Picasso had been willing, I knew it would have been a disaster afterwards, so it was better to abstain.
Yeah. Before he painted that painting, he had you model for him for an hour, just stand nude for him with your hands down, and just looked. He sat and looked at you.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
And you just stood there, and he stood there, and he looked in your eyes, and he looked
I don't
at
know
you.
if he looked in my eyes.
And then at the end of the hour,
yeah, that was it.
It was in his head.
It was fortunate because I would never have sat for him anyway for a longer period of time.
Do you think, looking at your own evolution as a painter, how would you characterize the huge shadow of Picasso on your own evolution and on the appreciation of you as a painter and your development?
Well, first of all, when I met Picasso when I was 21, I can say that without any special modesty because it's the truth. I was considered like one of the great hopes of my generation as a painter already. I had been recognized by other painters. And I think that it was not necessarily a shadow because, first of all, he was 40 years older than myself. That's 2 generations. So in a sense, if we had been maybe the same age, it would have really been a shadow. But since he was much older than I was, and he had done most of his work in a sense, and I had mine in front of me, he had his behind him in a sense. So it just did not... I thought I learned a lot from him, mostly in terms of not the style, but the way he worked, the concentration with which he worked, the unity of spirit, thinking about nothing else, giving everything away for that. So I think it was a great teaching, but more or less indirect. So shadow, you can be in the shadow when you are young. What does it matter? And it's better sometimes than too much sun too soon. Many young painters now suffer from that.
But he would look at your work and critique it and talk to you about it.
Yes, we did, but mostly we talked about art, examining other painters, not because sometimes then it's a little bit too direct if you speak about what the other one is doing, especially when it's not finished. So most of the time we would take examples in, Manet or Cézanne or Van Gogh or something, speaking about another painter, but saying what we wanted to say.
Do you think your relationship with Picasso was different because you were a painter?
Well, first of all, we would not have had a relationship at all if not for that. I think our relationship was basically about painting.
Yes.
I think on both sides. It allowed us to have that, to express that passion of the mind with somebody who could understand it and to have a dialogue. I was not bad looking, but there are so many other women.
Oh, no, come on. No. There was too much about you at the time to say that you weren't bad looking. I mean, we've seen photographs of you. Yeah, okay. We know what you were like at that time. I mean, you were very attractive, and there were other men who were admiring of you as a painter, but also as a woman of beauty. Sure. And Matisse would be one of them, and Braque would be another.
Those things come in a package, usually.
Yes. But when you look back at that period, as an artist for you, it was a very good period for you. Forget the personal relationship, just for your evolution as an artist, because...
Yeah, because you see, since at that time, It's as if I had been a scientist, I would have been like working in the lab, so to speak. So I did many experiences which are mostly theoretical, many of which are very minimalist, that people have mostly not seen in this country. But so I worked all the time. I worked very intensely, but I was not. I did my first exhibition during that period in '52.
You once said about the relationship with Picasso that lions like lions.
I said mate with lions.
Mate with lions.
Or lionesses.
What did you mean?
Oh, well, because, people always ask very bizarre questions like, why did Picasso like you, or why did John Salk like you? So I said, well, usually, I said lions do not mate with mice. They prefer an animal of their own kind.
Someone who has the same instincts, the same combative spirit, the same powers.
Power, yes.
Power.
It's all about power.
Relationships are about power.
Yeah. I think so. Even love gets very boring if it's just passive on one side and the man being the only one providing ideas, etc., and the woman is passive. Then that's what I always told Pablo, who said, well, why do you always contradict me and all that? I said, because it remains interesting. It's a dialogue. Otherwise, you'll speak to yourself. You can speak. Everybody says yes to you. So I provide no once in a while,
And he liked that, you think?
Yeah, because it makes you feel alive. If everybody says yes to you, then, you are very powerful, but you're also alone.
You were different than any of the other women in his life.
I don't know, because I know who I am, but I don't know who the others are.
But you do know. You know much about Dora Maar. You know what she was like. You know what Marie-Thérèse was like. You know what Olga was like. You know what Eva was like. And they were all different. And they more were caught up in the orbit of Picasso than you were.
Many people are not trained to think for themselves, Maybe in those generations which were previous to mine, don't forget, I was supposed to become a lawyer, etc. An international lawyer. I was not a stupid girl. I could be on my. I could really. I was also born in a layer of society which was probably higher, if you like, or more complex than the others.
Then you had a strong father who made you a strong daughter.
Yes, sure.
You finally, with Picasso, as you wrote about your book, decided to leave.
Yes.
Why?
Well, because you see, when I met him, I was 21 and he was 61, and until then, in a sense, I had been having that relationship very strong with my father, and in a sense, I was capable of discussing, but in the end, I would obey him most of the time.
Your dad?
Yes. And then when I found myself in a situation where Pablo himself could have been was the age of my grandmother, for example. So to begin with, I didn't find it strange that I would have to obey him, because I used to obey all the people older than myself. Then, by the time I got to be 30, was a quite different story. By that time, I knew very well what I wanted to do. It was not necessarily what Pablo wanted to do. Plus, by that time, I had 2 children. I think they had needs of their own, and I wanted them to be my main interest in life apart from my painting. At that time, I was very clear about it. I told Pablo that our relationship had to change in nature, or else it would probably break. And also, at that time, he had, started again his kind of Don Juan type of behavior, and I thought...
His what kind of behavior?
Don Juan.
Oh, Don Juan.
Type of behavior.
His eyes were wandering.
Not only his eyes, he was... And I thought, well, this is really strange, and maybe something that would have made someone, older than myself very unhappy or something. I just felt, isn't that bizarre? I mean, I am the one who's young. I am the one who might do something like that. I can't understand why he doesn't see that it's very dangerous for him to do things like that, because I'm not going to like it, I'm not going to bear it. And then in that case, I'll be just as well on my own. Since I knew I had the power to bring up my own children and earn my life for myself. So he thought, when I said, well, you'll have to make a choice now. He thought
and what was his choice?
His choice was either we would rethink our relationship and make it much more equal, and I would have more freedom because I needed more freedom, and I didn't want to be 24 hours, all the time, and I thought I might want to be 3 months somewhere else or something. Not necessarily just to be on my own. And but he was used to that type of relationship with me, and he thought I was not serious when I said that if it could not change, then I would leave. So he said, nobody leaves a man like me. I said, well, you have not seen it yet. And I hesitated for about 2 years because of my children. If it had been only me, I'd have left right away.
But he knew, because he would say to his friends, Françoise is going to leave me.
Well,
he feared it.
Yes, I think he said that maybe to exorcise the idea.
to exercise, to get it out of his head.
And to
reduce the fear.
It would not happen, because he would say it might happen, but it would not happen. And myself, I was quite, it took me a long time to really make up my mind.
Why was it hard for you?
Well, it was hard for me on account of my children mostly. When I left Pablo, Claude was 6 and Paloma was 4, so it was really depriving them of their father, because I knew that after that he would pursue me with
vengeance,
etc. So that it was a very serious decision.
Was he a good father?
Yes, he was a good father, as long as we were all under his, his finger or something. At the same time, unknown to Pablo, my father, whom I had not seen for quite a number of years, had made, had talked to me and said that he thought that my situation with Pablo was beginning unbearable. He knew me too.
Was that because you talked to him, or because he just knew you?
No, he knew me, and he thought that the relationship had deteriorated. That was known to several people, So my father knew about that, and he contacted me and said, well, from now on, if you need me, I'm there, etc. So what he did, I said to him, no, I will, even if I have to do something, I'll do it on my own. I don't need you financially or any other way. But what it did to me was that if my father thought I was in a very bad situation, it had to be true. So, in fact, my father is probably the one who finally destroyed the relationship by what he had said.
If he knew it was true, then it was true.
Yeah.
Because you had such respect for your father.
Yeah, exactly. So if he thought it was not, it was no longer a dignified situation for me to stay there, I thought he was right. So that counted a lot in my decision.
Do you remember when you went to the train to leave? When you finally left him and took the kids?
Yes.
Well, remember that for us.
Well, we were in Valoris, and I had a car come pick me up and take the children to the station. And we came by the night train to Paris.
When did the vengeance begin?
Vengeance began right away as far as I was concerned.
Yes.
But the vengeance didn't start apropos of the children until 1961, when he got married to Jacqueline, because at that time she wanted to exclude my children
from seeing their father.
Yes, and that was very bad for them, of course, because it was undeserved, unannounced. And I felt that it was despicable behavior, because when Picasso had wanted those children, I, being in a situation which was, unusual at that time, not married to him, I really didn't want to have children in that situation. And Picasso said, well, yes, but I do, etc., and I will always, remain a good father for them. So, in fact, he just didn't do what he had said he would do. So
You were, I mean, everybody remembers that famous Robert Capra
yes, 48,
photograph
yeah.
on the beach with a parasol.
Yeah.
You are walking along, and he's behind you, looking like a little puppy. Yes?
Well, I don't know if he looked like a little puppy. I think he looked more like an animal, a little bit more important than that.
But the notion was, there is always this about the two of you, notwithstanding how abusive verbally he may have been, and how
I know, but Pablo.
you were strong.
No, but Pablo, you know, during one day, would start in the morning by being in a very bad mood, and then you would tell him, no, life is marvelous, etc., etc. He would get decided that maybe life is not so bad, etc. By the end of the day, he would have he would go from one mood to the other, up and down, up and down. So the fact that he had bad moods didn't surprise anybody. I mean, it was also a second time around because my father had terrible moods, so I didn't care about that. I mean, I just took it in stride, you know. It was not so. And when he wanted to be charming, he was the most charming man that you can think of. If he wanted to charm you, seduce you, everybody would charm and seduce by him. Then after that, he would play them a bad joke or a bad trick if he had that in mind.
Do you believe that he viewed women as either goddesses or doormats?
Well, that was. I regret I wrote that because that was just a boutade, you know. I mean, it's something you say, but it doesn't mean very much. Supposedly, I was in the category of goddesses. So.
Well, you were in some category that was different, in
Yeah.
a sense, because you were tough.
Yeah.
When you look back, it has now been since you met Picasso.
But
in
I was tough because I had to be tough. Otherwise, I'm not tough.
You were
Meaning,
tough.
meaning
No,
by
you're
that,
tough because you're tough, not because you had to be. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that with him, I had to be tough because he was tough. So I gave him
As good as he gave.
as he gave me. If I am with somebody very nice, I can be very nice.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk about that later, but with other relationships. But then with Picasso, why did you write the book?
Oh, but that was later on.
I know, it was in 1963. You published it in 63,
Yes,
64.
I started it in 61.
Right.
So it took me about 2 years to write it.
Was it because you just wanted to document my life with this man? Or
It's
because
not my life, it's simply life with
Oh, life Picasso.
And I forget the possessive pronoun because I'm not possessive.
Oh, you're not possessive.
No, and in French it's called vivre avec.
Life.
To live with. It's the infinitive.
Ah.
But the book was written in English first. Anyway, it's precisely life with and not my life with. Because it was life with Picasso, it was him and his friends. And accessorily, I was like the camera recording what was going on.
Yeah. Has your perspective on that changed with years? The nature of the relationship, as you had more experiences, become wiser?
Well, yeah, but I don't quite see what you mean because in life we don't have a return ticket, you know.
I know, I understand. I know.
We have
But
a one-way ticket.
But you get wiser and you look at things and you go through it and you look at things
Yeah.
back with a different perspective as you
Yeah,
you
but
might
I think
have been when you wrote a book, as you might have been at the time you were living it. You might see it differently and understand it better or differently. No.
No, I don't think so. I thought that when I wrote the book, I thought it had to be written while he was still alive, for one thing, and also while I was remembering everything very clearly and well. I didn't want to wait longer for those two reasons. So.
And by that time, you had nothing to lose. Jacqueline had
Well, you know,
said...
with Picasso, I never had anything to gain or to lose.
But you might not write it because, you might not write it, say, for the children's sake.
On the contrary, for the children's sake, it was better that I wrote it because that's how later on I won all the legal things that we had so that they could, be completely recognized and be the heirs of their father, etc. No, on the contrary, and I took advice from lawyers. Don't forget, I could have been a lawyer myself.
Yes, I know.
So that was to the good of my children.
I want to pick up the strands of your life. All right. You leave Picasso with your children. You're in Paris.
Yes.
You were painting, and you've never stopped painting.
Yes.
1955,
Yes.
you married Luke Simon, who's a
Yes.
painter who you've
Yes.
known for a long time. That marriage lasted how long?
7 years.
Good time for you, or
Well, it was, yes, like any
relationship?
like any
Ups and
relationship,
downs.
ups and downs, and especially two artists together, I think is specifically difficult because our styles were extremely different, and I would rather not discuss. With Pablo, for example, I could discuss art very well because we really had a mindset that was quite compatible. Even though my art and his art is different, still it was based on certain principles that were compatible. With Luc Simon was more, a painter in, following on one side, if you like, Chagall, on the other side, the surrealist. There was no link of that kind. We had a link of, love and passion, etc., and human link, but we didn't have a link as painters. So that was what made the relationship difficult because we didn't see eye to eye in our works. And I would rather not discuss it, but he wanted to discuss it all the time, so that made life fairly
Oh, he
difficult.
wanted to discuss the
Yes.
differences between the two of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
You had a daughter
we had a daughter
who's
together.
now an architect living in Paris,
Yes.
who was with you in...
Yes, because
La
we divorced when she was about 6 years old. And I started to come regularly to the United States in 1961, and every year spending 2 months, 3 months in the United States from then on. And also at that time, I had a studio in London.
And you were doing oil paintings then? Were you in a particular period or
Yeah,
not?
I was in the period of the
Oh, this
Greek
is
thing,
from that period.
Yeah, and this one also, that's 1960.
So this one here is
in
what?
64.
This is 64, and this one
is
is...
60.
And tell me about those two paintings.
Well, the one down there is a reflection of... I used to spend a lot of time in London, and when I was in London, I used to go to Kew Gardens. So supposedly that's a painter in a conservatory. I don't know why the conservatory is all red, but that's...
You don't know why. You just felt that way. It was
No,
intuitive.
I just... Red for me is just intensity, mood.
Yeah, me
You
too.
know, like when you compose music in a major key. If you use the blues, it's like a minor key, so it's melancholy. The blues are melancholy, the reds or yellows are cheerful and strong. So depending what type of mood you want to convey, you use different colors.
This painting.
This
It's
painting-
cooler. Blue is
Yeah,
cooler.
Yes, and that's also of Greece. It's called Eros.
Eros.
Yes, the angel of imbecility. Because I thought that Eros, or love, is the angel that makes us make all those stupid mistakes.
We do stupid things when
yeah,
we're in love.
Yeah, exactly. So that's that was a statement about that.
It's hard. Jonas Salk, you
Yes.
go to California.
I went to California because I had a show in Los Angeles in May of '69.
And when do you meet him?
And when I was there in Los Angeles, I went to the Tamarind Institute, to make lithographs as well. And since I was there for about a month, I didn't have time to finish what I had started. So I came back in October, again to Los Angeles, to finish the work I had started there. And then, at that time, the executive vice president of the Salk Institute was a friend of mine. He and his wife, who was French, were both friends of mine. They asked me to come spend a few days with them when I was through with my lithographs. So when I was finished, I went to spend a few days with them before I went back to New York. So that's where I met Jonas.
So you meet Jonas.
Yes.
Is
in
it
October,
love at first sight?
I had told my friends, I don't want to see any of your scientists.
Because scientists and artists have nothing to talk about.
Right. So I said, I don't want to see any of them. So they said, well, okay. I said, I can go to a restaurant, etc. If you have to see them, I don't want to see anybody. I'm tired. I had worked a lot. I was tired. I just wanted to rest and be with them, and that's all. So the next day, John Hunt calls at home and says, well, I'm coming to lunch with Jonas Salk because we had to speak to... So I said to my friend Chantal, I said, well, I'm going to go to have lunch at the restaurant because I don't want to be with all of you. I don't want to see a scientist. That's out of my realm.
So at lunch you end up with a scientist.
So,
one of the most
they said
famous in the world.
It's silly because you just, if you don't want to talk, you don't talk. I said, fine, I don't talk. So I was there during the lunch and I didn't say a word.
Nothing. You just sat and listened.
Yeah. But what I did not know is that both John and Chantal, my friends, had described me to Jonas as somebody very vital, amusing, witty, etc. And he saw that lump there, was eating the salad and that's all. He thought, this is bizarre. That person is not at all the way she has been described to me. And since he was a scientist, his spirit of inquiry had to know more about that bizarre person who didn't behave.
And he thought the only person he could find out from was you. So
no, unfortunately, so I was there for a few days. So the next day, there was a big dinner, black tie and everything, in the honor of the Salk Institute. And he was sitting at the top, of course, on the day. And I was at the table where I was enjoying myself a lot because there were some other artists there. So we were joking and talking. And he thought, isn't that bizarre? I couldn't hardly see him because it was a large room, but he could see me. And he thought, yesterday she was like a lump, and today she's laughing like I don't know what. What is that person? So the next day he called me on the phone and told me he wanted to show me the Salk Institute, which is marvelous architecture, etc., by Louis Kahn, because you visited it. So he gave me the big visit. And then, of course, we started to talk because one of the things I love is architecture apart from painting. So then we had a lot of things to say to each other. And after that, I went back to New York, and he appeared in New York. And I went back to Paris, and he appeared in Paris. And then finally, we were married in 28th or 29th of June.
So less than a year after you met him, you married him.
Yeah.
Or he married you, whichever.
He married me.
He married you.
Because I didn't want to get married again. I thought,
so why did you do it?
No, because he said, I said a relationship would be all right, but I don't want to get married.
So
he said, why? It's very funny. So he said, why? I said, because I don't want to live with anybody more than 6 months a year. That's it. I need my own time to myself. Plus, I had my children, 3 children were, my younger daughter was still 13 years old, etc. So I said, I have my own children, my own family. I just can't have a relationship like that all the time. So he said, well, he gave me a piece of paper and he said, write down everything that you don't want. I give you an hour. So I wrote down everything I thought that would make the marriage absolutely impossible.
Close the case.
Yes, exactly. So I wrote very
And he said?
And then after an hour, I gave it to him. And he said, oh, very good, very interesting. I see you are very independent, so am I. It fits my perfectly. So I thought, well, I didn't do it well enough. So I said, but we don't know each other. And it may be very disastrous because, you're a scientist and I'm a painter, etc. It's very far apart. And we may discover that it's a big disaster, why you get married and then have to divorce 6 months later. So he said, no, because I have noticed that both you and me, all kinds of people want to get with us. And when one gets out for the door, the other comes in by the window. Yeah. So at least even if we are not so happy, at least we'll be like a citadel. We'll be a
fortress for each other.
A fortress for each other. I thought that was very clever.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, okay, then in that case, let's try.
And then you spent 25 years with him until he died.
Yes, so apparently the recipe was a good one.
Well, exactly, I was going to say.
It was the best recipe because on top of all, Jonas was a man of his word. We were not together year-round.
Did you find that science and art had more in common than you thought? Did you find the common ground between the two of you about?
Well, first of all, one thing that was entirely necessary was for me to understand what he was doing. To an extent, he also got interested in what I was doing, and we could speak cogently about it in the evening.
In 1995,
yes,
he died. Great man.
Yeah.
Yes. You couldn't paint. while.
Yeah, that's to be expected. It's even astonishing that I could start again after a while.
You can't paint because your heart's not there, your
No,
head's not there?
it's painting is a physical act. Painting you do with your body. You do also with your heart and your mind, but you do it also with your body. And strangely enough, well, first of all, maybe my mother, because she had been the one who had initiated me in art. I would look at a brush with disgust for 6 months. Then one day it stopped, but it's beyond the will. It has nothing to do with the will. It was like if you lose an arm, you cannot imagine you have it. And with Jonas, because we had so much, after all, 25 years and not 2 minutes, and we had such a good understanding of each other, a marvelous dialogue with our differences, but a marvelous dialogue, all of it. And on top of all, he died fairly suddenly, I had the intuition. I was in New York. I was supposed to come back a week later, and I had the intuition. There was a voice in my head that said, "Change your ticket. Go away today."
Today.
And since I'm intuitive, I have a tendency to obey those intuitions, not to let them go. So I thought, well, it's very bizarre, and even I had all kinds of appointments, etc. I said, well, okay, I phoned everybody. I'm going. They thought I was crazy. I arrived that evening in La Jolla, and he was not very well, but he had dinner with me, etc. And the next morning at 6 a.m., he was really in a very bad condition, and he died at noon. So I had the correct intuition that it was his heart.
Good for you. So you got there, you had a chance to have dinner with
him. Otherwise he would have been alone in the house. I thought, if I had not had that intuition, I would have approached that for the rest of my life. I mean,
it's interesting about these two men. Both had huge success relatively young in life. Picasso, Jonas Salk. Jonas Salk was 40 when he discovered.
39.
39.
He told me, yeah.
Yes. You had a huge experience, in a sense, because of the war, because of Picasso, because of what you did, who you knew, at a very young age. What do you want to do now with the rest of your life? What drives you?
Well, I am a painter, and a painter paints. Plus, I consider that I'm doing my best paintings now.
Do you really?
Yes.
Why? What makes them better? Because...
Well, it's simply there is greater ease. They come to me more and more spontaneously. I was always rather minimalist, but let's say that...
Minimalist about?
About. Why say more when you can say less? Or
less
economy of
more,
means.
Yes,
less is more. Economy of means. And I am a colorist, as you have seen probably. Yeah. So, but as you go on in life, I think that you put your act together more and more. It's a trajectory. You are the same person, but the same person in time has accomplished a trajectory.
When you look now at the life you've lived so far, not knowing what exciting things might be around the corner, not knowing what burst of inspiration, creation might yet happen, what are you proudest of that you have done so far? What has brought you the greatest joy?
I'm proud that I did more than 1,500 oil paintings and more than 4,000 works on paper. That's not
4,000 works on paper.
Yes, and they are good. I don't call that little sketches. Works that are really finished. So that's quite a lot of work. So I'm proud of all the work I did, because I don't. If I think a work is not of a certain level, I don't keep it. So I'm proud of what I have accomplished.
Do anything differently?
It's unthinkable, because if I were born, let's say, 20 years ago, then I would do things differently. But when you have to start from somewhere, you have some roots, and it's like a tree. If you are a fir tree, you are not a magnolia. If you are a magnolia,
or a pine, you're a fir.
Yeah. So usually your branches and your fruits are according to your roots.
To who you are. That's right.
So and then you develop, but still you develop, but you always develop in the direction of what you are. See?
The course is set by your
I
genes,
think-
and by your experiences early.
Yes, I think that there are three verbs in English, which is to be, to do, and to have. So an artist is the one who is and do and does. So.
And if Pablo Picasso, wherever he is today, says to you, as he did way back when, you will always, if you leave me, you'll be known primarily because of your association with me, what would you say to him today?
Yeah, but even at that time was not true. Because
but did he believe it? He believed it was true.
Oh yeah, well, fine. But we were placed at two different angles, so to speak. And in a way, for example, in 45, before, when I already knew him, but I had not come to live with him as yet, I was as I said, one of the most upcoming and forthcoming painters of my generation, like De Stael, etc.
And knew everybody.
And knew everybody. And I would have been better off just staying where I was. I would have been better known sooner. It was not the opposite. So I put that in my book to show the difference of understanding of a situation by two different people.
Let me hear you clearly. With respect to the Picasso relationship, we know 25 years and the pain you felt when Jonas Salk died. Picasso was different because you walked away.
Yeah.
You.
When I left, it was really finished because when he died, I didn't suffer one bit.
You didn't?
No. It was finished. I was
but
still
you have two children by this man.
Well, I love my children.
You don't love their father?
Well, it's stupid to love their father. I love his paintings, but I don't love him anymore.
Yeah.
Why should I love him?
For you, who are the great artists of the 20th century?
If you start with, Kandinsky, the German expressionist, Jawlensky, Franz Marc, etc., and Matisse and Bonnard,
Braque,
Georges Braque, etc., and then later on De Stael. And in this country, for example, I like Lee Krasner a lot, better than I do Pollock and Hans Hofmann and
de Kooning and Johns. And
I like Jasper Johns
Rauschenberg.
a lot. Yeah, I like who I like. I don't like everybody.
Are you influenced by people around you as a painter? Because it is said by many people that Picasso's later work was not nearly as good as what he did earlier because he needed to work and be fed by people around him.
I think it's true of everyone.
Including you.
Yeah, you can't, I don't think anyone, a human being, can exist in a void.
So when he was behind
you need, for example, Picasso needed poets as well, maybe even more poets than to interact with poets as much as to interact with other painters. I think it's a stimulation. For example, there is a bit of competition, so you see what the others are doing, you want to do something else. It's opposition many times, but that opposition is very constructive. And I didn't feel myself to be in an inferior position vis-à-vis Pablo at all.
Never?
No.
Not once?
No. No, because, what is this? I mean, if you are in a relationship with another human being, then you are two human beings. Otherwise, it's not worth it. If a person is supposed to be a god and I'm only a human being, then it's not worth it.
Why am I wrong in this assessment? You two were really very much alike.
Yes, that's true.
Very. Both of you.
We deserved each other.
Yes, exactly. You deserved each other.
Yeah, we deserve each other. Yes, sure. That's why it lasted quite a while.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Mon histoire, c'est l'histoire d'un amour